Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tully. I'm a senior writing coach with Defend and Publish. Welcome to episode 17, Getting Articles from Your Dissertation. One of the things that I found out sort of the hard way was working with a book project. It wasn't stemmed from my dissertation specifically, but it was stemmed from a first book project that I wanted to pitch. And I got the hard news that nobody would take this book, or there was an argument that the audience was too small for it. And this may happen to you as a new scholar, either from your dissertation or from something else that you turn into a book. And so one of the things that I thought long and hard about is what am I going to do with all this work? I've written these chapters, I've written this book proposal, I have all this really great content, and I still really believed in the project. For the record, the project was a book about the undergraduate writing methods course. The argument was that not that many people teach that course or care about it, which, in my field of rhetoric and writing studies, I still would make the argument that it's an important course. But nonetheless, it has a happy ending. And I want to tell you what I ended up doing with that. So one of the things that became very clear to me was that I needed to have a system about knowing what content from that abandoned book project I actually used in a publication, because I knew I couldn't turn it into another book, but there were chunks of it that might become other books later. They might become different articles. And for anybody that's written something as large as a dissertation or a failed book project, as in my case, that's an awful lot of content. I don't know how many words I had, but I'm sure I had around like 70,000 words or something like that. And I did not want to throw 70,000 words away. So here's some things that I did that I think can really help maybe give you some light into how to make publications from your dissertation. So one of the things that I started with was I sat down with the content and actually reread my whole project, and then I just took notes. And I took notes on all of the tiny slices I could get from this book project. So for example, one of the things that was in my project was a history as to why this course that I was spending a whole book on looked the way it did. It had kind of a messed up history that I thought was really interesting, and I actually did some really good archival research in there. So I thought, well, that could be a slice. I also had a survey with teachers in Ohio that taught this course at universities. And I thought, well, that could be another slice. There were many other slices like that in the book project. And so one of the things that became clear to me right away is I needed to think about how to structure what I was doing with this content in a way to, one, make sure I didn't duplicate information in two different publications. For example, I didn't want to like cut whole chapters or things like that and maybe reuse them, inadvertently or something like that. But another thing was to really think about small. And what I mean by that is that with dissertations and with books, we tend to think about a big argument and think everything has to be in there and it has to be really, really big. And you have to reverse your thinking if you want to carve up your dissertation into articles and think small. What are the smallest meaningful units that you could get out of this? And certainly we've probably all heard this in scholarship that some people take advantage and carve something up and reuse the same material over and over and over again. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about trying to get 2 or 3 good pieces from a dissertation or a failed book project. And so here's what I did to provide a system to it. I did, as I noted, make a big list of projects and that could be possible outlets for it. And that was really helpful to start, because one of the things that I did with that then was look at what I was really interested in, and then also what I thought would be the easiest success. And what I came to determine was, although I really liked the archival stuff, that survey was useful and that kind of data would get old. So I started with that as my first project. And then I'm going to walk you through a strategy that made this very clean and logistically possible for me to do. And I don't want to forget to say this, so I will say it now. In our show notes, I actually have screenshots of what this process looks like that I'm describing to you. So what I ended up doing was, with the failed book project, I labeled all of my chapter files and also the main big file of the book. I labeled that the master. So they all had like master chapter 1, master chapter 2, or, master book project as a whole, or something like that. I then made another copy of those master files and called those the record. So one file is the master, which was my originals that nobody wanted, but I wanted to keep them as they looked, so I knew what the original looked like. The record was a place where I kept track of what I used from the chapters. And what I did with the record is anytime I took something from a chapter. So, for example, that survey information I know was in chapter 1 of that failed book project. So anytime I took something from there, I used the record and then used copy and pasted it into a new document, and then I used a strike through. So why I did that was to make sure that I didn't have, I knew what I had already used and I couldn't use it again. It had a strike through on it. Another thing that I ended up doing, as I just mentioned, was then making a third file, which was actually the new article I was producing. So as a recap, if that got confusing, I labeled all my original files the masters, and then those were all to the side. So I had like a safety net of content that I didn't touch. I also made another copy of those files and called those the record. And that's where I tracked any changes of material that I copied and pasted and put into new publications. And for me, I did this with a strike through and also a little comment to note where I used it. Because one of the things that also became clear to me is, oh, I like some of my content in chapter 1 and I like some of my content in chapter 6. And I'm going to put that in a new document and a new article for a new publication. So I needed to keep really good notes of what got used where. So again, so I didn't like self-plagiarize, and so I didn't reuse information that shouldn't have been reused. And that was really helpful. The new document that I created for the new project I started was another strength, because I had to then not think about trying to keep as much as possible to do, for a better lack of a better way of saying this, not doing, not having to do as much work. I had to think from scratch. I'm building a new article. And so what I ended up doing then was starting my writing in that new article document. And then when I knew I needed pieces from my old book project, I went back and got them out of the record, copied and pasted what I needed. So for example, I knew I had a really great table in there of data from my survey. When I needed that table, I went back, got it, crossed it out using the strike through in Microsoft Word, and then wrote a little comment. Hey, this is this is in XYZ article. If I could, I even put a page number, even though of course in a new article things are going to move around a little bit, but it just gave me a quick note to know what that is. And again, I have screenshots that show you what all three look like. They show you what the master file looked like, what the record looked like with marking on it by me when I took things, and then where that ended up in an actual published article. So one of the things that I think is some happy news here is that doing it in this way is it really forces you to make choices about things that maybe weren't so strong before. Because even though I still argue for my abandoned book project, I think it's amazing. Maybe one day I'll even self-publish something, from the content I didn't use, who knows. But even though I didn't, it didn't get published, I did see weaknesses in there. I was like, oh, I really needed a chapter to explain X and Y, and I needed to explain these concepts. So I did find weaknesses in there. And so starting with a new document and starting fresh, like I'm starting a new article about this new thing, and then just going to get some previous research or some previous content from a literature review made it much easier to envision the new project. And I know that the writing that I did was much stronger. So as a happy ending to the story, I did actually get 2 publications out of this book project. So I'll put links to both of them in the show notes if you want to see how they turned out. I would argue they both are better. And they actually went to an outlet that supports that kind of work. I'm actually reaching the audience that cares about an undergraduate writing methods course. So I hope this strategy helps you. If you have any questions about, of course, you can always reach out to us on Twitter or, share this. We're always looking for content for other episodes. So this one was very helpfully suggested to me by some doctoral alumni from a graduate program, but we're always looking for episode ideas. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us on Twitter or, reach out with some comments or suggestions for episode ideas. And happy writing this week.